All right, let's get right into it. Now, you've probably heard of Pearl Harbor, right? But I'm willing to bet you haven't heard about the day, just a couple of years later, when the entire balance of power in the Pacific skies was just shattered. All in a matter of hours. Today, we're going to break down one of the most lopsided, most important air battles in history.
It all really starts with this number, 400. It's just a number, but behind it is a story of a catastrophic loss, a turning point so absolute it's almost hard to wrap your head around. So what does it mean?
Yep, 400 aircraft. An entire air force, pretty much, launched with the singular hope of breaking the American fleet, and they just vanished. They took off, and with only a few exceptions, they never came back. Which brings us to the big question. What in the world happened on that single day over the Philippine Sea? Because this wasn't just a battle, it was a massacre. It was so incredibly one-sided that the American pilots gave it a nickname, the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, and it would change the rules of air combat forever.
Now, to really feel the shock of that day, we've got to rewind a bit. Because in the early days of the war in the Pacific, the sky belonged to one plane, a machine that American pilots called a phantom, something that just seemed to defy the laws of physics.
So look at this comparison. It tells you everything you need to know. On one side, you have the Japanese Zero. It was sleek, it could climb like a rocket, and it could outturn literally anything the Allies threw at it. A true terror. And on the other side, you had the American F-4F Wildcat. It was tough, sure, but it was kind of stubby and underpowered. The tactics say it all. Zeros would dance and weave, while Wildcat pilots had to dive, shoot, and just pray they could get away.
And this quote, man, it just perfectly captures that feeling of utter helplessness. This is what American pilots were saying. Every single fight was a life-or-death gamble against a machine that was just plain better. If America was going to win this war in the air, they needed more than just guts. They needed a new kind of weapon.
And that weapon did arrive. But here's the thing. It wasn't just a new plane. It was a whole new philosophy of how to fight in the air. America decided, you know what, we're not going to try to outdance them. We're going to make their strengths totally irrelevant. And they backed it up with an industrial engine, the likes of which the world had never seen.
And here it is, the F-6F Hellcat. The engineers at Grumman actually listened to the pilots who barely survive fights with Zeros, and their big takeaway? Don't even try to outturn it. Overpower it. The Hellcat was built like a flying tank. It had armor to protect the pilot, fuel tanks that could seal themselves up after getting hit, and a monster 2,000 horsepower engine. This plane wasn't made to dance, it was made to brawl.
But you know, one great plane doesn't win a war. This does. Look at this chart. This wasn't an accident, it was a strategy. America decided to turn the war into a battle of pure production. While Japan was struggling to build a few dozen replacement planes a month, American factories were just churning out thousands. The math was becoming absolutely merciless. You might shoot down a Hellcat, but guess what? 10 more were already rolling off the assembly line.
And it wasn't just the planes. This industrial power was matched by a massive advantage in training. By 1944, a new American pilot went into his first fight with over 300 hours of flight time. Japan, on the other hand, had lost most of its expert pilots early in the war. They were sending up rookies with less than 50 hours in the cockpit. So you have this perfect storm, better machines, way more of them, and better trained pilots. The stage was set for a reckoning.
And that reckoning finally came on June 19, 1944, in the skies over the Mariana Islands. The Japanese Admiral Ozawa gathered every single plane he could find for one last, massive, all-or-nothing strike. He was going to break the American fleet once and for all. He had absolutely no idea what he was flying into.
The whole battle unfolded in these 4 desperate waves. The Japanese kept coming, but each time they were met by this perfectly coordinated wall of American Hellcats, guided by newfangled radar. And look at that 4th wave. By the afternoon, Japan was so desperate they were literally throwing obsolete training planes into the fight. It was an act of pure desperation against a storm of steel.
So how did they do it? How is it so lopsided? It came down to a simple, brutal tactic they called boom and zoom. It's exactly what it sounds like. Step 1, Hellcat pilots used that powerful engine to climb way above the Zeros. Altitude is life, right? Step 2, boom. They dive down at incredible speed, unleashing hell with those 650 cal machine guns. And step 3, before the agile Zero could even react, they'd zoom,
using all that speed from the dive to climb right back up to safety, ready to do it all over again. They simply refused to play the zeros turning game. And the result of these tactics? It was staggering. By the time the sun set, this was the Japanese tally. 395 of their planes were gone, confirmed destroyed. Just let that number sink in for a second. And the American losses for the day? 29. And get this, not all of them were even from enemy fire. Some were just operational accidents like landing mishaps. The difference is just, it's almost hard to believe. And this final number really puts it all into perspective. For every single American plane lost, Japan lost more than 13. You see, this wasn't a battle. It was exactly what the pilots called it, a turkey shoot. It was an annihilation. You know, the silence over the Pacific that evening must have been something else. Because more than just airplanes had been lost that day. An entire military philosophy, Japan's entire carrier air force, had been wiped off the map in a single afternoon. This quote from one of the American commanders on the scene just says it all. There was no gray area here. The force that hit Pearl Harbor, the one that had terrorized the Pacific for years, was gone. Not weakened, not bruised, destroyed. So here's the bottom line. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot was the turning point of the air war in the Pacific. Japanese naval aviation as a real threat ceased to exist. From that day on, American carriers owned the sky. It was the ultimate proof that a new kind of warfare had arrived, one where industrial power and mass training could just overwhelm a smaller elite force. And the Hellcat? Well, its legend was sealed, ending the war with an insane 19-to-1 kill ratio, one of the greatest of all time. Which leaves us with this final, really provocative thought. The turkey shoot signaled a massive shift in warfare. It suggested that maybe the age of the lone, heroic ace in a superior plane was over, and it had been replaced by the age of the assembly line, of logistics, of just overwhelming numbers. It really makes you wonder, had war become less about the skill of the warrior and more about the output of the factory? That's a question that you could argue we're still grappling with today.